Welcome to this week's Hagley History Hangout. At the Hagley Museum and Library, we document the unfolding history of American business and technology and their impact on the world. My name is Laura Wall. I am the library conservator at Hagley. Through this series, we will draw on Hagley's extensive research collections to tell you surprising stories about our past. My talk today will explore caring for family photograph collections. Ever since I first took a photography class, I've been very surprised by the magic of developing and printing photographs. Photographs can be exposed to many things that cause damage, but I'm also frequently surprised at their durability. Like so many things, they change with the passing of time. Even with these changes, they still hold beauty and value. There are many ways to make a photograph. So many I can't cover all of them here. Instead, I'll try to describe features of the types of photographs you most likely have at your home. Once you understand the different processes used to make photographs and how to identify them, you'll be better prepared to give them the care they need. For each process, I've listed the date range of the time period when they were originally produced. Many art photographers like to experiment with different historic processes, and it's not unusual to find more modern versions of different types of historic processes. Oops. All photographs have a layered structure, and this strongly influences how they react to handling and changes in humidity. The image itself may be composed of silver, platinum, pigments, or dyes. Most, but not all, silver images have a binder layer where the image particles are contained. The binder layer may be gelatin, collodion, or albumin, which is made of the whites of hen's eggs. Photographic images have a support layer or base, which is most commonly paper, but it may be metal, glass, plastic, or even cloth. To protect the image from abrasion and pollutants, many photographs do have an added surface coating made of varnish, collodion, gelatin, wax, or albumin. The coating may have been added after printing by the photographer, or it may be included in the manufacture of the paper. These different materials have different sensitivities, and I'll explain some of the factors that influence the condition and life of a photograph. The daguerreotype was the earliest photographic process made widely available to the public. In 1939, the method for making daguerreotypes was conceived in France by Louis-Jacques Mende Daguerre. A daguerreotype has a highly polished and mirror-like surface. It consists of silver and mercury particles resting on a silver-coated sheet of copper metal. The image-forming particles compose the highlight areas, and the polished plate serves as the dark shadow areas. That might seem counterintuitive, but that's how daguerreotype works. An 8-plate panorama of the Cincinnati waterfront, made in 1848, reveals the time that the photograph was recorded in a distant clock tower. The image also has a lot of very interesting details and signs on buildings and the steamboats and paddle boats on the river. A daguerreotype plate has, the daguerreotype image is easily destroyed if the surface is marred. Historically, they were stored in a sealed hinged case with a metal mat called a preserver, along with a covering glass. The plate and housing together are called a cased image. Some daguerreotypes were sealed inside a paper window housing and matte package called a passe-partout, and then they were framed for display. This was more typical in France and Europe. The image can be obscured if the metal plate becomes tarnished. This can occur if the sealed case components are compromised. However, you should never attempt to open a case to remove the daguerreotype. Also, you should not try to attempt to clean tarnished plates. Touching or brushing of the image surface can cause permanent scratches, and commercial chemical silver cleaners also leave sulfur residues that are nearly possible to rinse away. These sulfur residues create complexes with the silver, and they turn into blemishes over time. Each daguerreotype is a one-of-a-kind image. There was no way to reproduce multiples of the daguerreotype unless the image was re-photographed. It's not uncommon to find later types of photographic paper print process that are actually reproductions of the daguerreotype or other cased images. Details of the preserver mat or surface characteristics might be seen in these reproductions. Two other types of photographs often housed in cases are called ambrotypes and tintypes. Both of these are silver collodion images with a creamy yellow hue. Collodion is a viscous substance created from cotton fibers dissolved in nitric acid. This collodion was hand poured onto the metal or glass plate and made light sensitive by addition of silver nitrate liquid while in a tray. It was then exposed in the camera while still wet. Because of this handmade process, these photographs frequently have irregular flow marks, thick and thinly coated or uncoated areas, as well as bubbles or inconsistencies in the image layer. The irregularities on the edges are often covered by components of the protective case. Collodion was also coated on glass to make negatives. The ambrotype is a negative image on glass with a black lacquer paint layer on the back to make the image appear as a positive. The tintype has a support of black lacquered iron sheet metal. Tintypes are commonly found in paper mounts, and they were inexpensive and fairly quick to produce, so they were frequently made by itinerant photographers. Most tintype photographs are commonly taken with a commercial background or furniture or other supports for the people to prevent them from moving around during the exposure. Tintypes may suffer from rusting of the metal plate, and if the plate becomes bent, the collodion may crack in that area. If the corrosion is underneath the image-bearing collodion, the image may crack itself and lift away. And this is an image of some blistering on a tintype, and you can see it in the top right area up here. Most tintypes are varnished. This example has an altered surface texture because the varnish had become softened at the time when something was touching the image surface. These two tintypes have printed information about the gallery where the portraits were taken. The item on the left advertised the service of reproducing old daguerreotypes and ambrotypes. Ambrotype images on glass are susceptible to breakage, and the glass may exude salt components, which look like tiny droplets under magnification. Keeping these photographs in a dry environment is important to lessen these problems. Any of the cased image processes may have pigments added to the lips and cheeks of the sitter to give them a more natural appearance, or even golden highlights painted onto the buttons and jewelry. Salted paper prints are the earliest photographs on paper. The first salted paper prints are the photogenic drawings of Englishman William Henry Fox Talbot. He decided to call them photogenic drawings because his invention was precipitated by his lack of skill with a pencil. Silver salts, either silver chloride, silver bromide, or silver iodide, are the light-sensitive materials that form the image of many monochrome or so-called black and white photographs. To create a salted paper print, the paper was coated with silver chloride, allowed to dry, and coated again with silver nitrate. Salted paper prints are matte with a reddish brown or purplish tone, and the paper fibers are easily visible. The printing out method creates silver image particles that are spherical and small, and therefore they are much more likely to fade in light or with exposure to pollutants. Pollutants can include acids and other chemicals from acidic papers with lignin and from adhesives like rubber cement, which contains sulfur. Salted paper prints were printed from either a paper negative or a wet collodion glass plate negative. They are a printing out process, which means that the light-sensitive printing paper was sandwiched with the negative in a printing frame and printed in sunlight, at which time the image became visible or printed out onto the paper. The UV light from sunlight helped to hasten the printing, but the printing still required a significant amount of time. When the image became sufficiently dark, the processing was completed by toning in gold chloride. One interesting fact is that the positive printing out photographic images are the same size as their corresponding camera negative. Many prints are small, but 18 by 21 inch prints called mammoth plates were used for landscapes. This required a very large camera with a tripod, as well as processing chemicals, all that were carried out into the field. Just imagine how much effort that would take today. Albumin printing papers were coated with egg whites and sodium chloride before the addition of silver nitrate sensitizer coating. These papers were printed in the same manner as salted paper prints, using the frames. Typical deterioration of albumin prints include yellowing and cracking of the albumin binder and fading of tiny image particles. The papers were made commercially and they were extremely popular for several decades until the turn of the 20th century. They were printed in several sizes, most commonly the carte de visite, the cabinet card, and the stereo view. Stereo views were placed in a viewer to merge the two slightly different prints into one simulated three-dimensional image. And this was a very popular pastime at the time. Platinum and palladium prints consist of an image that is directly on paper. The paper fibers are visible with magnification. Platinum and palladium images are often in very good condition without any fading. That is due to the stability of the platinum and palladium metals, which are not affected by pollutants the same way that silver is. The light areas of the plain paper support can yellow, depending on whether the paper was adequately rinsed during processing, and the paper support can become brittle. Platinum images may have a painterly quality when glycerin development was used. This employed a glycerin solution that was locally applied by brush to control the development of the image in selected areas. Each glycerin-developed platinum print is unique. Platinum prints may be warm brown, cool black, or neutral in tone, depending on the type of paper, the toning chemicals used, or the environment at the time of creation. They also may be printed on handmade or commercially produced papers. Typically, they're seen mounted on boards or in paper folders that may be selected to match the coloration of the photographic image. Cyanotypes are blue-colored images composed of ferrocyanide pigment, which is also known as Prussian blue. Similar to the platinum print, the image particles rest directly on the paper surface with no binder or surface coating. The cyanotype process is also used for producing blueprint architectural reproductions. They are quite easy to make. The sensitized paper is simply exposed to sunlight with the negative or with ultraviolet lamps, and then it is followed by a rinsed in water to complete the process. Cyanotypes were commonly used as a proof process for the preliminary assessment of a negative. The Prussian blue pigment can revert to a white form when it's exposed to light, causing bleaching of the image. This change is thought to be largely reversible with the return of the print to dark storage. It's unknown if it's 100% reversible, however. Cyanotypes are also sensitive to alkaline conditions, so a pH above 7, and the paper material in which they are have direct contact should be unbuffered. Gelatin silver prints are the most common black and white photographs. Of the two general types of gelatin prints, the earliest is printing out paper. Like albumin prints, gelatin printing out papers are contact printed in a frame. They were rinsed, toned with platinum and gold, and fixed with sodium thiosulfate, then extensively washed to remove any chemicals. Later gelatin silver images were developing out prints, or DOPs. The image may have been contact printed, but more commonly, these negatives were enlarged by projection of the image onto the printing paper. The picture did not become visible on the paper until it was placed in a developing solution. Development was halted by acidic stop bath and then fixed with sodium thiosulfate to prevent continued light sensitivity of the image. Lastly, there was an extensive wash in water to remove residual chemicals. Inadequate washing or processing can result in discoloration and staining of the photograph. Gelatin silver prints can also vary quite widely in coloration, depending on the type of light-sensitive silver salts used, whether the print was toned, or if it's deteriorated. Color may be neutral black, greenish black, purple brown, sepia, or yellowish brown. Commercial developing out papers were sold with many surface texture options, thicknesses, and paper tints like buff or cream. They may be matte, glossy, or have a pearl surface sheen. The image material of silver gelatin prints, being silver metal, can fade and turn brownish by pollutants. Pollutants might include outdoor sources like car exhaust or indoor sources like varnishes, paints, and cleaning chemicals used around the house. The gelatin silver image may also form a shiny layer of silver mirroring if they're exposed to humidity and pollutants. Humidity allows the gelatin emulsion to swell enough to allow pollutants access to the silver particles with which they chemically interact in an oxidation reduction reaction. The silver medical particles then migrate to the surface. The gelatin emulsion is also susceptible to mold if the humidity is high for a sustained period. The highlights may appear slightly yellowed as the gelatin ages and discolors with exposure to heat. Cracks in the paper and image layers can occur with careless handling or haphazard storage. The gelatin emulsion can also crack and flake if the photograph becomes very desiccated and dry. The image can also be affected by acids and peroxides that may emanate from poor quality papers in which they are stored, or from wood that is nearby. Acids can also come out of wooden storage cabinets. The chemicals can also damage the paper base of the photograph, leaving brown coloration and embrittlement. So choosing appropriate storage containers consisting of acid and lignin-free paper envelopes, and boxes can help protect these photographs from damage. Gelatin silver photographs sometimes may be sulfur toned, and this creates a sepia toned image overall. Toned silver photographs generally don't suffer from silver mirroring or fading. Beginning in the 1960s, gelatin silver prints had optical brighteners added. They're called optical brightening agents, or OBAs. These help to increase the whiteness of the highlights. They are similar in function to the whitening components of modern laundry detergents. These optical brighteners are water sensitive and can be washed away if wetted, and they may fade over time with exposure to light. Their presence is most obvious when the photograph is examined with an ultraviolet lamp. Most photographs before the 1960s were black and white monochrome images. But during the decade of the 1960s, the sale of color film eclipsed that of black and white. This was largely due to the new Kodak Instamatic camera, which had an easy load film cartridge. Most color photographs of the 20th century are composed of dyes. They are so-called chromogenic color materials. They contained color couplers in the paper that reacted when immersed with oxidized chemical developers. The earliest commercial color transparency or positive color film was made in Germany in 1936 by the Agfa company. Some chromogenic prints develop a yellow cast in the highlights caused by residual yellow coupler staining. Other prints may shift to a magenta tone as different dyes have different rates of fading. Unfortunately, these color changes are not reversible. Once the fading begins, it often continues even when the photograph is placed into cold storage or into the dark. Museums and archives store vulnerable color materials in cold or freezing temperatures to slow the chemical change and deterioration. Resin-coated papers were first introduced in 1968. Most chromogenic color prints are on resin-coated papers, and many silver gelatin developing out images are as well. The core paper layer is sandwiched between a plastic polymer film. This plastic-coated paper is less absorbent, so it requires less chemicals and water for processing. It was also much shorter to process. Because the plastic does not respond to moisture, any folds and creases in resin-coated papers are nearly impossible to remove. Even though they are more recently made, digital photos printed with modern technologies are, in general, more susceptible to damage than prints from the 20th century. Inkjet printers may use dye-based or pigment inks. Dye-based inkjet prints in particular are likely to fade and are especially sensitive to the pollutant ozone. The dyes are highly susceptible to bleeding from moisture and humidity and fading from pollutants. Pigment inks, on the other hand, lay on top of the surface and are subject to loss of the image by abrasion. Some inkjet printers have a Brita layer similar to that of standard silver gelatin papers, and they produce a smooth white surface. Art style papers often have a more textured surface, and when used with pigment inks, they can produce intense or saturated colors. Digital prints may be also purchased from self-contained machines typically seen in camera stores, pharmacies, or big box stores. These prints may be made on chromogenic paper, or they may be created with the dye diffusion thermal transfer process, also called D2T2. This method uses heat and dye imbibed in a ribbon to transfer the image to the paper support. D2, T2 images consist of lines of dots about 200 to 600 per inch, so you would need a magnifier to see them. Most of the D2, T2 printers add a wax coating to the print surface overall. The prints that come from this process often fade in light, and the dyes may migrate if they are exposed to heat. So once you're ready to go rehouse your family photograph collection, before you start rehousing them, you might want to look at the collections and organize them by date and size. Photographs can be permanently damaged by skin oils from your hands, so wash your hands thoroughly before getting into your photos. It's best to use tight-fitting nitrile gloves when handling photographic materials to prevent damage to the silver, and especially you should wear gloves when handling film. If you've inherited a collection like my family collection, your photographs may be all mixed up. This will be the time to do your detective work as you start sorting. Observing the photograph's size, paper thickness, surface texture, or type of borders, such as a white border or no border, straight or toothed cut edges, and observing the image content will help you to sort them. Determine if the photos have a date stamp on the front or the back as well, or a print number. Before discarding any old photo lab envelopes, copy the written information with a pencil to the new enclosure. If you're like me, you might want to actually keep the original envelope. Negatives should be moved to a box separate from prints because the plastic of the negatives releases acids as it deteriorates. Create a method to label and locate these negatives that match your prints before separating the two from each other. If you have framed photographs of any type, if they have no window mat or there was no spacer placed between the photo and the glass, the image may have become adhered to the glass. This is most common with gelatin photographs. This can happen if condensation forms inside the glass, if the ambient air has a high humidity for extended or repeated periods, or if liquid cleaners sprayed directly onto the glass have leaked inside. Once adhered, some prints are nearly impossible to remove without damage, especially the resin-coated papers. If prints have become damaged in this way by adhering to glass, I recommend just leaving them in the frame. If the frame has an acidic cardboard backer or wooden piece behind it, this should be replaced as long as the backing is not glued to the back of the photograph. If you have special prints that you view regularly, you might want to house them in clear plastic, especially mylar plastic L sleeves. These are the easiest type to load photographs into. Mylar does cost more than paper, however. Small-sized 4x6 photographic prints can be stored vertically in a shoebox-style paperboard container. Photographs in good condition can be grouped without individual storage enclosures in order to save money. Paper envelopes or cardstock dividers can also be used to keep photos from the same roll of film together. Group photographs of the same size together in the same box and make sure the boxes you choose are not oversized or undersized. Also be certain your stacks of photographic prints are neat and that the larger prints are supported. If a large print is left hanging off the edge of a pile of smaller prints, it may become permanently bent or distorted, and the image layer can become damaged. The photographic activity test, also known as the PAT, is an aging test that can determine if a storage product will cause damage or deterioration to photographic materials. Be sure to look for paper materials that are acid-free, lignin-free, PAT tested, and passed. Opaque paperboard storage boxes are important to protect your collections from light. Do not use albums with self-adhesive or so-called magnetic style pages. These materials are made with chemicals that cause prints to permanently adhere to the page, and the adhesives can cause permanent staining to your photographs. Photographic slides are easiest to view and access if they're transferred to plastic 3-ring pocket pages. It's very important to avoid the use of polyvinyl chloride plastics, also labeled and called PVC, because this plastic releases sticky plasticizer as well as hydrochloric acid. The plasticizer can dissolve inks and it will adhere to the photographs inside. You should purchase pages made of polypropylene from reputable preservation suppliers. If the plastic has a vinyl shower curtain smell, you should avoid using them. Good luck with your photograph rehousing. Here I've provided a few references to guide you through finding more information about the photographs in your collection. If you need information about preserving your collections or you need a conservator, you should contact or look for the American Institute of Conservation on the internet, where you can find the Find a Conservator button, and you can also find more information on caring for your family collections, everything from furniture to prints to paintings. Thank you for listening to this edition of Hagley History Hangouts. We release a new episode weekly. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hagley's own resource page, hagley.org/from-home. Thank you. Oh no.
Okay, I'm back.